Hey, AmCon. I'm George Bell. I work for Fieldcraft Survival. I'm filling in for Mike today. A little bit about me. I've known Mike for about, I say, since 2012. I met him in Libya. I was in the military as well. I was psychological operations. Did that for 20 years. I retired. Then I came in 2018 and worked for Mike, and I've been here ever since. I wear a lot of different hats at the company. If you see me around, I'm either doing ops, running around and getting stuff done. So that's who I am. Today's guest, we have Mike Shelby. He is the founder of Forward Observer, and we just want to welcome him into the show. Mike, welcome. So let's kind of start off. Your company, Forward Observers. Kind of give us a little background. Tell us about your company. Tell us about you first. We want to know about what's Mike has going on right now.
Sure, yeah. Well, yeah, thanks for having me. I was an intelligence analyst, and I spent 3 years in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I came back, and in the mid 2010s, like 2014, 2015, everyone was concerned about gun confiscation, and and before that as well. And I started Forward Observer because people needed timely, reliable information. Mm-hmm. And as an intelligence analyst, I'm probably uniquely suited to give that to them.
Oh, yeah. So you had this idea. Did you have the idea while you were downrange and you came back? Or was it when you came back, you were like, man, I could really help the public benefit from what I've learned, but I can do a civilian type spin on it?
No, I tell you, I got really interested in kind of like in preparedness in 2008, when I was in Iraq, and I was reading the blogs and stuff, and it was just like fear pumping, like, oh, the world's gonna end, like, oh, this, and maybe for some people, yeah, the world was ending, or it looked like it was. Mm-hmm. But the more I actually started looking at the data, the more I was like, yeah, this is bad, but this is like not world ending for the United States, like. It's not going to collapse and shatter into 1,000 pieces. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of the first time I kind of realized, people probably need something that's not from the mainstream, but gives a more kind of ground truth look at what's actually happening. So it's not quite like the peddlers of doom and fear, but it's also not the talking propagandists in mainstream media. Right,
and it's weird how on the news you see it, it just shows like a circle like that big, and it shows all the violence and everything. Right, yeah. And then when you actually pull back and look at it, it's just a couple square blocks where it was, but they make it seem like the whole state is being overrun by protesters, rioters, and things like that. So that's good. Like you kind of take that small picture, expand it out, and then give the right information. That's good. So what's the process? Take me through it. How do you get that information, get it out of wherever you're getting it from, whatever platform it is, and then what do you do to vet that information to make it real to where people are getting it and they're like, okay, I believe this? Sure.
Well, we have subscriptions to a lot of the mainstream media outlets, so we get stuff from them. I subscribe to every leftist magazine and news outlet that I know of, because that's one of our main things is tracking the far left. And I'm not just talking about your everyday your aunt who's a liberal. I'm talking about actual leftists, like revolutionaries types of folks. And then we pay for data services. So information that comes from data mining, we take all that in, we sort through it, and we monitor a lot of other news sources. We sort through all this stuff. We look for indicators of political, social, or economic or financial instability, and then we give a very rational, even-keeled look and analysis at, here's what the news media says. Mm-hmm. This other outlet's blowing this way out of proportion. But our analysis, here's what you actually need to be concerned about. Right. And it's very much geared towards the preparedness community.
So how many guys, how do you have it set up at the office? How do you delegate the workload, and how do you spread that out? And then for for your, you do political, economic, is that kind of how you do it every time? That's how you focus your I guess, the information and getting it out?
Yeah, so we do a daily report. And what I find is a lot of people, they're maxed out on time. they work late, they come home, they got kids and soccer practice and all this stuff. And one reason why people read our daily reports, because we end up saving them a lot of time, right? They're not having to spend hours trying to keep up with the news cycle. 90% of that stuff's completely pointless, and it doesn't matter today, and it's not going to matter tomorrow. And so really we separate the signal from the noise. So yeah, we have a few employees who help manage information for us and help look for indicators. And really the big thing is we provide context to news. So it's not like a pogo stick like today's mainstream media. If they're talking about one thing, they're gonna in 72 hours, it may as well happen 72 years ago. So we really answer the so what.
Right.
This happened today. If it doesn't matter, you're not going to hear about it from us. But if there is a so what, if it's like, hey, this thing is forming a trend, this is really going to matter in a period of days, weeks, or months, then yeah, here it is. You need to pay attention to this.
Yeah, it's kind of like we talked about earlier. It was like you sit down in your battle update brief, and like you have your S1 section, like your human resources section, and then you have the S2, the intel section. It's just give me the intel. I want that section to where I can pull that section out and just take that, instead of sitting there waiting for the news outlet to go through their stories, and I have to pick and choose what I want to believe and things like that. But I think what you're telling me is you give me what I need, like that snapshot, that battle update brief, for lack of better terms. But I get what I need to get out of it, and then I'm gone. Because like you said, we're busy. We have families, we have soccer practice, we have appointments, and so if I'm out, I want to know what's going on in my community, because I don't want to get stuck like that one Uber driver that turned the corner because that's what the rowdy gave him.
Right.
He turns into a protest and he has to get his CONUS kill. He has to kill somebody, which I don't think anybody wants to do that. Just driving an Uber. So.
Right. No. Yeah, that's a really great way to describe it. It's kind of like a battle update brief for preparedness. People who, let's face it, this country has probably insurmountable strategic problems. And we've been dealing with them with varying levels of success for the past decade, or really since, I guess, 2008. I think a lot more is in store. And the title of our report is called Early Warning. And so what we do is we serve up early warning. Like, this is what we think could happen, or here's a range of things that could happen. This is what we think is the most likely thing to happen, so that people can start to prepare for this stuff. So it just doesn't pop up on the radar and everybody's talking about it. You can find about it months, weeks or months in advance through us. Right.
So yeah, that's a thing. Like we were talking, any like that service that you provide is like, it's information. Like if you're not getting information, you can't act on it. You can't do anything with that information because there's a lack of it. So I'm looking at it as, I get this information, I'm better prepared. Like, it's intelligence. It's like, why wouldn't you want intelligence? If any operation you're in, you have to have that intel to carry on. So you provide the best service there is. I can be prepared. I can have the water, the extra gas, the bug out stuff. But if I don't have the intel to go along with it, I may not know where to go, what route to take, things like that. So
everyone has an OODA loop. And especially in emergencies, observe, orient, decide, and act. And intelligence is the first part of that OODA loop. If you can't observe and you can't orient, deciding and acting is going to be impossible or very, very difficult.
Oh, yeah.
And you want to make well-informed decisions. Anybody can flip a coin and, decide on a course of action that way.
So take me through, like, if I'm Joe Schmo, I think I'm prepared. I have the extra magazines, I have the extra ammo, I have the guns, I have the food, but I don't have that intel, like that intel training. What are some of the things, like, for, I spent 20 years in the military, so I'm very familiar with the intel world, but at the same time, it's always interested me on, like, man, building a target packet, building that information to make that next decision. How would you, like, you're taking that information or that skill set and providing it to civilians? How, like, take me through that process. Like, let's dig in deep on the intel side. Like, how do I do that?
Sure. Well, really, there's one thing we do, like, okay, on the economic side, like, I'm not an economist. I don't have a PhD. Probably to my credit, I'm not an economist. And, economists are like one of the few professions where you can be wrong every day and, not get fired. But what we do is we have data sources from a lot of hedge funds and, like, major financial firms. And so we track what they're putting out. And so one thing that we do is, economically is we'll tell you what like inside, I wouldn't say inside information because it's not like insider trading stuff, but if this hedge fund or this, this big money manager who manages hundreds of billions of dollars, we'll tell you what they're saying. And so that way, it's like instead of, you start to build a frame of reference. Like, oh, JP Morgan is making these moves because they say we're going to have this turbulent period, or inflation is coming, or deflation is coming. And so some of that stuff is, allows you to make some strategic moves. We're not a financial advisement firm, and this is not financial advice. But in terms of preparedness, I'm concerned about the future of the dollar. I'm concerned about the price of gold and the price of assets. Andrew Yang, not too long ago, and I really hate to quote the guy, but he's, back during the George Floyd riots, he said, this is a place where race riots can turn into food riots. And he's, basically talking about domestic disruption. And I think he's right. And especially as we come up to November to January, a lot of people have a lot of questions about what that instability is going to look like and exactly what's going to happen. And so we try to provide people early warning of things that, like breakdowns that we see coming in the future.
So you're looking at like the trends, you're looking at the fluctuation in the market, you're looking at what these investment firms or whatever they're investing in or whatever they're kind of reporting on and what to look for.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And then you take that and kind of, you give it like I don't want to say Barney treatment to where it's, because I mean, you can come at me with hedge funds and talk about this. We can maybe get like 5% of that, but people, the way they consume energy, it's like bits. And if you're throwing like a big report out, it's like,
no. We don't talk numbers and
Yeah.
We don't gloss anyone's eyes over.
Yeah.
We say, this big bond trader is talking about the yield curve and here's what's going to happen. By the way, here's what this means for the average person. I'll give you a really good example that's far out, but in terms of timeline. But JP Morgan did a study on the lifespan of a currency as world reserve currency. They did about 400 years worth of world reserve currencies, starting with the Portuguese real up to the US dollar today. And they found that the lifespan is about 100 years. So, the US dollar is going to have about 100 years as a world reserve currency. Well, what that means for us is, look, if we start, say, 1940, the US dollar, after Bretton Woods, the US dollar basically becoming the world reserve currency. Well, 80 to 100 years beyond that, I mean, that's like 20, that's coming up in the next 20 years. So what does this mean? What happens to us when the US dollar loses world reserve currency status? We have this massive debt. We have massive international demand for the dollar. What happens when that international demand dries up? What's going to happen to the dollar? It's going to greatly devalue. And so, this is far enough in the future where we can start to make strategic level decisions on how we're going to handle that. The boys up at JP Morgan, that's what they're doing. And so, I feel like everyone should have that kind of warning. Like everyone should know what these big guys are talking about that's coming down the pike in the future.
Yeah. I remember I was at this conference in was the Naval Warfare Center grad school or whatever like that, and I went to this conference and it talked about like water being a water shortage. Like think about that. Like that blows my mind thinking about like they're talking about water shortages and how we're going to get water and with the Chinese and the China Sea and them blocking stuff and just it blew my mind. I'm like, wow, I never really thought of it like that. So those are the things that I like people need to know so they can better prepare.
Absolutely.
So then you get to the economy part, and then what's kind of another like what's the next step for like the average Joe?
Yeah, so our report is broken up by political, economic, and then what we call what the Army actually calls low intensity conflict. So we pay attention to what's going on in politics. Like obviously with the election around the corner, we're looking at what does a Biden administration look like, and who's going to win. And I think people just want a rational look at it. I don't think the polls are accurate, but I think people want a rational look at that. And so, that's one thing we provide. And And then finally for low intensity conflict. So the Army has this doctrine called low intensity conflict, and it is war that is below the threshold of conventional warfare. So we're not talking about tanks and bombers, but it's
like kind of like a revolution or like a civil war kind of, is that?
Yeah, a lot of those are low intensity conflicts. Yeah, so we're talking about below the threshold of conventional war, but above routine peaceful competition. And the United States right now is in a low intensity conflict. It is in this gray area. Like nobody can look at America today and say that this country is at peace. Mm-hmm. We're not quite at war yet. But you start looking at low intensity conflict, and a lot of the warfare actually is not violent. We're talking about political warfare, economic warfare, diplomatic warfare, information warfare.
Yeah,
right.
The meme warfare. I mean, that's a thing. Like it's called mimetic warfare.
Right. Yeah,
it's
that's
a
right.
thing, and it's very interesting. We had a guy come out to when I was in the military to our operational design course, and he did a whole class on mimetic warfare, and it made sense. I mean, it was good. I want to get the slideshows and share them with people, but I just have to find it still. But yeah, it's crazy. Like it's nuts what's going on right now.
Yeah. Well, there's a war. I mean, there is absolutely a war going on.
You can see it. People are choosing their sides. Like you can see it every day on social media. You see it in the news. It's either red or blue, and that's how they're dividing us. So it's sad. It's sad that people are using someone's last name as like a shield to like, this is who I am. I represent this. And it's like, man, why can't we just not do that and just like chill? Like we shouldn't be divided. Like just so weird to me that we do that. But yeah, like you said, low intensity conflict, that's what we're in right now. Mm-hmm. So like what are some of the things that you have seen through, I mean, since you kind of started the company, but when did you start it? Back in 2000?
Yeah, in 2016.
2016. So what have you seen since 2016, basically an election year, 2016, to now, to this election year? What have you seen through your analysis, like kind of the trends and things that you've seen so far for this upcoming election? Sure.
Well, I have a special interest in leftist groups because spending so much time downrange tracking insurgencies and insurgents, it's like, my career is kind of built for this kind of work. And unfortunately, I really, I guess fortunately, I didn't expect that we would have an insurgency in the United States. But I do think we're in a period of proto-insurgency in several places in the United States. So one thing I started doing is tracking indicators of organized political violence. So there's a lot of what we've seen is like sporadic opportunistic political violence. And my concern was that eventually enough people who who support political violence are going to start grouping together. And then this no longer becomes like, oh, hey, there's this guy over there wearing a Trump hat, let's go beat him up, or whatever. It becomes like, oh, hey, there's this individual, there's this influencer on the right, and if something happens to him, then the right will lose a prominent figure, a prominent loudspeaker. Key communicator. Exactly. That's a great term. And so I do think we're probably headed towards that point. But just to state this case, over Thanksgiving break in 2016, we had like 6 or 7 out of 20 indicators of organized political violence. And the way indicators work is, like let's say we're looking at Russia. Is Russia going to invade the Baltics? Well, we'd make a list. What needs to happen before Russia can invade the Baltics, right? So they have to stage, they have to start plussing up fuel supplies, they got to start, delivering supplies and all this stuff. They have to get the bodies, the manpower there. And so, if there's 20 indicators there and you're like at 5 of 20, well, maybe the Russians are going to invade the Baltics, but it's not going to be tomorrow. And then you tick up to 10, 15, 17 out of 20. And now at 18 out of 20, you're like, yeah, this thing could actually kick off tomorrow. And so a lot of times, no one is going to come and say, hey, intelligence analysts, like this is going to start next week. We got to put the puzzle pieces together. So with these leftist groups and these indicators of organized political violence, November 2016, we're at 6 of 7. 1 year later, November 2017, we're at 13. And we've been ticking up from there, So really, we are very close to 20 out of 20 right now.
Wow.
So and that's started to manifest itself, like with these shootings, like the guy that was murdered, just outright murdered. Was
the Trump supporter.
Yeah.
And he was shot by that one guy, and then he said he was physically harming my friend or something like that. Was his excuse?
That was his defense, right? Yeah. So I think, just by the doctrine of low intensity conflict, and the U.S. right now is really going through a tectonic cultural shift. And when those tectonic plates bump up against each other, you get an earthquake, and that's where we are.
Yeah.
And that could, now here's the difference between what we do and what other people do. A lot of people can say, well, we may have a civil war, or there's going to be a civil war in this country, which may be accurate. We try to be precise. We try to tell you, hey, here are the players. Here are the actual groups. This is their observed behavior, and be very granular in doing that. So we're not just telling you, hey, this is something that millions of other people are saying.
Yeah.
Like, we're being very specific with what we're telling you.
That's weird, because we did that, like when I was in Ukraine, we did these products to where we made these dossiers on like key communicators that were Russian influences that were in Ukraine and influencing everything. And it was cool because you basically built a packet. Like we had my psyopers, they were just comb through so many amounts of information, and they were pulling out stuff that people like, our stuff made the news because it was like, oh my goodness, like we didn't know this. So we were finding stuff that people weren't aware of, and we're putting that information out there, and it was getting traction. Like it was pretty cool to see how people take that information, it's credible, and they take it and they're like, oh, okay, now I see. So no, it's so like the similarities, it's uncanny, and it's all simple information. That's all it is.
The tough part is putting it together.
Yeah,
and,
that's
and
yeah,
really,
you're
and
right.
getting the meaning. Like, what does this actually mean?
Yep. Why am I putting this information out? So once you do, so these people, are you broken down in like into like regions throughout the states, or like if I live like in Portland area, is there when I go to the Forward Observer, I'm able to get the information I need like for my section of the country?
Well, eventually, yes, that's the plan. Our report is broken up by region.
Okay.
But I don't want to just pull out like 20 pages of, hey, here's all these things that these groups are doing. So pretty much what we do is we pick the most important things and include that. But yeah, if you live in Portland, you're going to hear about Portland anarchists and the latest things that they're doing and what they're developing. So
if I'm out and I finally woke up, I'm like, hey, okay, I'm going to prep now. I'm going to get the right information and everything like that. Or if I see something, like how does one become like, if I want to contribute, or I want to be, I want to learn that intel stuff, how do I gather that information and put it in a structure to where I can help other people with it? Like, the information itself, how do I break down intel and put it to where I'm helping people or I'm preparing myself?
Well, what I recommend people do is there are 4 basic intelligence gathering disciplines that the average person can employ, like today, this afternoon. The first is human intelligence. So identify, get your friends and family, if they're plugged in or they have their ear to the ground. And I'm not talking about like James Bond or espionage or anything like that, like running sources and infiltrating groups. But in the Army, we said every soldier is a censor, right?
Yeah.
Every soldier has an obligation to pass along information. And in your preparedness groups or your community security teams or, whatever groups you're in, every individual is a censor. As an intelligence analyst, I'm limited by what I can see and hear. But if I have 20 people in my community now all piping information into me, then we could start putting the puzzle piece together. So first, leverage like-minded individuals. It's like these AMCON groups, for instance, right? I mean, that's, something that's already happening.
Yep.
But, I'm seeing these more local, like where I live, there's a local AMCON group. And so the first thing I would do is ensure everyone is passing along information. Like, don't assume your buddy saw it. Like, pass it up if, if it's not necessary, then nothing lost. The second thing is signals intelligence, SIGINT. And we can be very rudimentary, something as simple as a police scanner. There's a radio that I use that has a close call technology. It's made by Uniden.
Mm-hmm.
And what that does is it picks up the nearest frequencies, basically the strongest frequency. So for instance, if you've seen a lot of pictures or video of these anarchists and stuff, some of them have Baofeng radios. And so I call it my Bubba finder. And so if someone's communicating on a bubble pack walkie-talkie and I've got my close call radio, it's just a receiver. I literally just hit that close call button and it's going to pick up their transmissions. So now I can start listening in. Right. Yeah. So for unencrypted communications,
Mm-hmm.
There's a few radios that I can recommend, but if you have to be in any geographical proximity to something like that, you find yourself in something like that, that may be one way. Also, intelligence is a team sport, so it's not like you can do all this stuff by yourself. It definitely takes a team. Beyond that, there's open source intelligence, so we can data mine. Definitely go out and find the Twitter handles,
Mm-hmm.
of these groups, because some of this stuff, they'll talk about fairly openly, and you just keep tabs on your local groups.
Okay. Do you do is there a section that you give reports on like who to follow, or like here's like kind of the key communicators in these groups, kind of keep a lookout on what they're putting out?
Well, we have a massive database of these sources. We don't recommend anyone, we don't provide accounts for people to follow. The nature of our work really is that we have to protect our sources. Mm-hmm. And so even though this stuff is out in the open, we have had instances where, leftists will get our reports. And so I don't want to tell people, hey, we're getting this from this Telegram channel.
Yeah.
We really try to protect what we do, because, that's kind of the nature of the beast. One thing I think is unfortunate that's probably going to happen is if Trump does win and the left does go absolutely berserk, there may be, Twitter may tamp down on some of these Twitter accounts for these leftist groups, which would be great for disrupting their coordination.
Right. Yeah.
Not so great for an intel guy who's monitoring those communications.
So do you feel let's just say the night of the election comes, and how are you guys going to be on standby? Are you going to have like everybody's out there, like wherever you have analysts at, and help people so they can get that? Trying to be, because where we were talking about 15 minutes on the news is like, might as well just be like a day old stuff for like kind of what you guys are doing.
Yeah. And if I can just tell that story real quick. So in 2014, we battle tracked the riot in Ferguson, and we were using the same things. We were using human sources. So we had people in Ferguson and St. Louis giving us information. We're listening to local radio frequencies. And it just so happened that was kind of like the perfect storm, because you have local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies, and they didn't have, the only way that they could have interoperability on their communications is if they all transmitted on the same band and on the same unencrypted frequenries. Mm-hmm. So really that was a massive gold mine for us. But what that allowed us to do is get real-time information. And I hear, all these, from time to time I'll go give a talk on this stuff or go teach a course, and I hear people saying, well, yeah, I'll watch the news and that'll be my intelligence collection. Well, we routinely beat the news by 5 to 15 minutes with what we produced, and then 15 minutes later it was on CNN. So if you're in a riot, or if you're in an emergency and you're depending on a news source, then that information they produce may not be timely. And in a riot, 15 minutes may as well be 15 years ago.
Right.
So that's why I highly encourage everyone, you have to be your own intelligence collector. Like, you have to be your own first responder. You're going to have to be your own intel collectors too.
Oh, yeah.
Because there's so much stuff that we're just not going to get from the news.
So you say you teach classes. What kind of classes do you teach?
Yeah. Well, right now I have a 2 or 3 day tactical intelligence course where we really get into the weeds of this stuff. We talk about, how to do an area study, how to look for assets and mm-hmm. liabilities for your own area.
So what sorry to interrupt, but like what kind of, so you're telling, you have this class of 20 so students, like how do you get them to get in that mindset of like, hey, here's the assets, like here's like who you need to talk to, the assets, like break it down, and like, are these people, are they, they're probably just regular citizens, but can you see them in the class like I don't think this guy's going to go out and do an asset thing and talk to people. Is it, because I look at it, it's like more like a personality type thing. Like if I can't hold a conversation with, like right now we're holding a conversation, we're building rapport, we're getting to know each other.
Right.
By the end of this, we'll be best friends and we'll be on Instagram and Facebook,
Right.
It takes a special person to do that, like to develop those relationships and networking. A lot of this is networking. And so do you kind of hit on like, hey, this is how you just don't go into a situation and demand, information, or do you kind of give them like human intelligence? Do you kind of break it down on like, hey, this is how you do this?
Yeah, we start very basic. Yeah, it takes a pretty unique personality to be a good human collector.
Right.
And I don't advocate everyone just go out and start, recruiting your sources,
Right,
spotting and assessing and all this stuff. What I tell people is start by leveraging friends and family and, acquaintances. And that's really the best way to do that. But what happens a lot of time, or this is the best way to start doing that. But what happens a lot of times is that, a preparedness group will send, like 1 or 2 people to the course. And I teach them, here's how you develop an intelligence network. Here's how you set up all your various methods of collection. And then they go home and they work with their group, and then they start tasking out like, okay, great. Here's your job, you do this. And now let's start gathering information and compiling it so that we can be more aware. That's the thing all these people are saying, well, I'm preparing for EMP or societal collapse. They're really not. They're preparing for the follow-on effects of that.
Yeah.
And so if you can't describe what your community is going to look like in 72 hours after an EMP, like you may have all the food and water and guns and ammo in the world, but there's no amount of beans, bullets, and Band-Aids that can produce intelligence. There's no amount of beans, bullets, and Band-Aids that is going to help you understand what's happening beyond your line of sight. There's no amount of beans, bullets, and Band-Aids that's going to help you identify threats in the area and monitor what they are doing in an emergency. Everyone has to be intelligence, everybody.
Oh yeah, dang. You have to be, because if you're not, like you said, one miscommunication, that could be someone's life.
It could, yeah.
Or you're losing you're losing something and you can't get it back. So
yeah, my favorite quote comes from Jack Welch. He's a former CEO of General Electric, and he said, if change on the outside is happening faster than change on the inside, then the end is near. He's talking about responding to consumer preferences and research and development and stuff as a corporation. But as a community or, a group or a security or preparedness group or whatever, if things out there are happening faster than we can stay aware of, then the end may very well be in sight. If there are threats out there who are doing things that, and I'm not saying that we're going to know every little thing that they do, but if we can't maintain situational awareness on what's happening beyond our property, in the worst case scenario, that could be, incredibly dangerous for us.
yeah, do you remember I think it was back in 2014, there was an attack on a substation in California, the Metcalf substation.
Yeah.
Do you remember that? And
I
then,
do, yeah.
But I don't think they even found any, they have no suspects or anything. It was like they cut the fiber wires at a point to where it was impossible to fix it, and then they were in the field, they were shooting the electrical things. They had
the transformer.
Transformers with the oil and stuff in it, so they had to shut that down. And then other than that, that was it. Nothing else happened. You didn't hear anything about it. So it seems to me do you guys get report, if a report comes like that, how far in the weeds can you guys get into that?
Yeah, we really can't predict when that stuff is going to happen.
Yeah.
So there's kind of 2 elements. We try to help people. We produce early warning as much as on as many events as we can. And the other thing is we train people, right? I can't possibly know everything about your local revolutionary communist group. You can. So what we try to do with early warning is kind of give a national picture, help identify trends and threats that are going to happen out in the future, and then provide the training so that you can do a lot of this stuff on the local area where we can't. We just don't have the manpower. We don't have the tools. If I had an ace of 100 analysts, yeah, sure. We could really get get into some stuff, but I don't.
Yeah. What was that? The group that we were talking about was a socialist.
Socialist Rifle Association.
Yeah. What's what are some things that you could share and report on for something like you said, you can't teach those people but they have to. You can't show them who's local in their group, but if I live in an area with that group there, like what are some of the things that I could, what look out for? Like what are the indicators, I guess?
Yeah. Well, these groups, they are going to local ranges. And one thing I would look for is developing capabilities. So like a few of these groups we've seen, like when they first started off, right? They had like a 30-06 rifle and their granddad's shotgun, and then a year later, now they're all decked out in AR-15s and, they have plate carriers and body armor. And you actually look at some of the gear and it's like, well, this guy didn't just buy this off Amazon and put it together yesterday. Obviously, someone is teaching these people how to put their kit together, and I mean, you know how easy it is. You look at somebody and you're like, oh, they're squared away. They're a soup sandwich.
Just the way they hold themselves, you can just tell.
Right. Yeah. And so I would look for development of that because that could indicate a lot of things.
Because you said they started out with like 3,000 members, and then all of a sudden now they're like within 2 or 3 years they had like 7,000.
Yeah. Early this year, prior to George Floyd, they had like 3,000 members, and then just like in 3 or 4 months, they have 7,000 members. And George Floyd was like obviously there's a lot of mis and disinformation about what happened there, but that was like a huge rallying cry.
So, and what do you think caused that rallying cry? Did you guys see any trends or anything like spikes of information that kind of pushed it to that?
What's interesting is that after like 2016 and 2017, Black Lives Matter, the movement really kind of died down. Like I remember I'm not seeing as much stuff. They're not holding rallies, like they're not doing anything, and they pretty much went dormant. Maybe some of that was due to internecine conflict, because the founders were arguing with each other, whatever. And then, all of a sudden, George Floyd, and then boom, protests just across the nation. And I really think that was pushed. I mean, I think it was deliberate.
It was like
it's a psyop.
Yeah,
is what it is.
Yeah. It's a psyac for sure.
Yeah,
and
psyac.
Then you had a lot of those people. You had those people like all of a sudden you're down in the town square and a pallet of bricks show up. It's like like trying to track that down and find that. I want to know who did that. You know what I mean? Like that's something. It's some intelligence that would be like if we find that out, that'd be cool. But besides like reporting on like, do you see like when you see numbers spike like that in these organizations? Do you guys send reports out, or people like? Do you get a lot of people volunteering information to say, "Hey, this is what we saw. This is why," and then like how do you package that up, and then how do you deliver that to your paid subscribers or whatever? How do you deliver that, and how does that look when you unpackage it?
Yeah, well, we do have a group of volunteers called Fox Company, and we really started that in 2018. There's a group called Cajun Navy Relief. And it's just a bunch of rednecks and Cajuns with boats, and they'll go in after a hurricane, and like Hurricane Harvey, and they'll just literally rescue people like out of their attics and off the roofs of their homes. So I started Fox Company because we were trying to provide intelligence support to Cajun Navy Relief, and I just couldn't do it by myself. And so I thought, I have a bunch of students who are really trying to cut their teeth on real world thing. This is a very real world thing. We're talking about active search and rescue operations that we can provide intelligence support to. So I just sent out an email to everybody. I said, hey, if you want to jump in, here's our Discord server. And so, that's, we've done other things like with riots and stuff. And, so we do have a group of volunteers who help us monitor certain groups.
Oh, cool. And what's your vetting process for when you get intel information, and then how do you vet the people that kind of are? Do you have any like vetting like within your group, and like how do you differentiate the real information from the fake information? Sure.
Yeah, that was a concern of mine, but we haven't had any problems. There's like a general vetting process. Look, we don't. Just because it's one-way communication, I'm not concerned about them like leaking lots of information. So that's one way we've mitigated. Like obviously,
you just deliver they take it for what it is, and there's no interaction.
Well, no, they pass information up to us, and then over a period of time, it's like people prove their reliability. We can look at reporting history and say, yeah, actually, this guy's produced a lot of good stuff, and then further vet them from there. But what we do is once we take it. We have to identify the veracity of the information, and a lot of this stuff comes from I would say non-sensitive reporting. So like they're not infiltrating the group, because here's the problem with intelligence, right? It's like if I were to tell you that Vladimir Putin had scrambled eggs for breakfast yesterday, right? A lot of people would say, well, that's like unclassified information. But what if only 3 people in the entire world knew what Vladimir Putin had? And now all of a sudden, me telling you that, like, one of these 3 people had to have told me this. Mm-hmm. And so we do our best to protect sources and methods, about how we get the information. But, telling you that a specific anarchist group in the Pacific Northwest is developing intelligence capabilities, that's the kind of stuff, we'll provide some specifics, right. But, that's the kind of stuff we provide.
Right. We had it like in PSYOP, we were part of the information operations. Even though we were separate, it's information, we're part of that. Mm. And, we had defensive information operations and offensive operations. Do you guys kind of have it kind of set up like kind of where you defensive, offensive?
Yeah. I mean, there's intelligence and counterintelligence. We don't really run very elaborate CI. Mm-hmm. But yeah, we...
like, how do you protect your guys' information? Like, what are some of the...
Well, we can just sanitize it. Instead of saying the Puget Sound John Brown Gun Club, mm-hmm. we can just say, hey, this armed anarchist group in the Pacific Northwest
right.
is doing this. And, and then if I know people personally, or if we have longtime subscribers, then I can go in and give the details to those individuals.
Oh, cool. So these, like the 2 to 3 day courses, they're like kind of setting you up to provide, teaching the student to obviously to gather the intel they need and share it with their friends or friends and family to start out with. What else goes into like the journey of, that person taking that like 2 to 3 day course. And then when I'm done, what is my capability when I'm done with that course? Yeah.
Well, your capability when you're done with the course is you're going to be able to set up an ACE. If it's by yourself or with a few, ACE is analysis and control element, basically what we call the intel shop, S2 or, mm-hmm. Whatever. Yep. And yeah, you're going to be able to, one thing you do in the course is you identify all your sources in an area. Mm-hmm. And I'm not talking about human sources, but all the sources where you can find information locally through signals intelligence, open source intelligence, and imagery intelligence. And so once you leave the course, you're going to know how to set that stuff up and how to begin monitoring information. And it's really, the tactical intelligence course really is like kind of a bare bones. Obviously, you spend 4 months in the schoolhouse mm-hmm. in the Army learning right. intelligence analysis. So we can't do a lot in 2 or 3 days. But what I can guarantee you is that students will come out of that and they will know how to gather local information. And even if they don't go do it,
they still have that knowledge.
They do have that knowledge. Yeah.
Well, that's cool. So what do you see yourself like for Forward Observer? What do you see in the next like 5 years? Because now we have the election coming up. We're really, with all the numbers and everything like that. I mean, honestly, you kind of know who's going to win. Like, I think from what I've seen in the news and trends, like the numbers are still skewed, like you said. Mm-hmm. But how do you see it? Like, just say if Biden wins the election, how do you see your company in the next, his 4 years of office? Is it going to, do you think you'll be restricted? Do you think things are going to happen to where they're kind of, where people are going to come after you guys and try to like shut you guys down or anything like that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, that's something we have considered. Well, the first thing is, regardless of who wins, these leftists aren't going anywhere.
Right.
Right. The militias and the 3% groups and all that stuff, or 3%er movement, they really didn't go anywhere. Like mm-hmm. they're still there. There's, they may not be training as frequently as they did. And so that's, I kind of look at these leftist groups and like, it's not a perfect analogy, but they're basically like the right wings, militia mm-hmm. or, 3%er groups. So that mission is going to stay there.
Right. Yeah.
This low intensity conflict. I mean, look, the cultural problems we have and the strategic problems that the United States has, low intensity conflict is not going anywhere. It's only going to get worse. So really, I think the next, probably over the next decade, our mission is not going anywhere. Like we're still tracking these groups. Mm-hmm. We're still, I look at this like tracking or describing the insurgency in Iraq or Afghanistan. We're providing a national picture, and we're showing people what's going on, like at a deeper level. Like you're not going to get this through Fox News or, whatever. And we're much more liable than, a blog, that might just opine on Civil War, whatever.
The thing I'm not worrying about, but it's like they will just come after like Forward Observer because of what you're doing.
Right.
And then you have these groups like, trying to shut you down, or they're like, well, these guys are anarchists, or these guys are militia, they're extreme. Like, what do you say to people like that? Or like, what are your actions of like trying to like, hey, we're not some extremist we're not part of that. We're just giving you information. Like,
right.
What do you say to people? Like, what's your narrative?
You cannot negotiate with these people. Mm-hmm. So we can't battle, we can't backtrack our way and be like, I'm anti-communist. Like I really cannot stand these people. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm so interested in learning about,
very interesting
how they work and what they're doing.
Yep.
They're revolutionaries. And, one thing I've been very fortunate is to have been able to do is build a very solid tribe, and it's, if something happens to me, I think we're just going to dump all this stuff that we have and just say, hey, here, like Edward Snowden level NSA dump,
right.
Like here's all the stuff that we have, like the, dead man's grenade or, whatever.
Oh yeah.
But I don't, everyone runs it.
Same thing with here,
and Mike Glover, you run that risk.
Oh yeah.
And
we're going through it right now with all the censoring and everything getting shut down. And to me, it's like, why are you doing it? Like because it's one person that doesn't agree with what we're putting out. They go up to the second person doesn't like it, and they're top of the food chain. So of course they're gonna shut us down. If they're in the position of power, of course they're gonna come after us because of what we say. It's like, oh, you don't like peace, you don't like information, and it's so frustrating at the same time to be shut down for something like everyone should know. Even the bad guys should know to stay away from these it's open information. Anyone can get it. Why wouldn't you want that?
Right.
But then you have these groups, they're violent groups, but they're still up. Like, so where are we at? Like, where is the line? And like now, and I guess we'll find out next few months or so, or about next month or so.
Yeah, I think we'll continue to find out over the next several years. But yeah, that does concern me because if you want to blind an organization, like if you want to blind the army, actually I just back during when Syria was kicking off, like they went after a bunch of Syrian intelligence officials, like literally just shot them dead in their driveway. Mm-hmm. And, and then at the time it was reported on the news and I was like, they just took out a colonel who spent 20 or 30 years in the Syrian army.
Yeah, he survived 20 years. He must be doing something right.
Oh, yeah, that's right. But now you've taken 20 years of intelligence out of that organization, And so it's like Michael Collins back during the Irish Troubles. They went after British detectives. They went after British intelligence. They blinded the British. Observe and orient. If you can't observe and orient, decide and act. It becomes way more difficult. Yeah. So, yeah, that does concern me. But, it's like if it happens, it happens. Better do it right the first time, I guess.
Do you see, obviously BLM, Antifa, whatever they're called. Do you see them like since, I guess, 2014 during Ferguson to now? I mean, obviously their tactics has changed. They've gotten smarter. How do you see that next couple of years? Do you see their tactics evolving even more and being more like, getting inside an organization to where they can, manifest it from inside, or are they getting smart? That's what I'm saying. Like their intel is obviously getting better, but what is their actions? Are actions getting more, spy, like spy game type stuff? Are they trying to get in these organizations and, kill it from the inside out, or do you get reports like that?
Yeah. So I think there are two things going on a much broader level where the cultural revolution that's happening right now is part of the low intensity conflict. And you look at how conservative institutions, have been targeted. Like the Boy Scouts is a really great example. It's like you're creating new generations of, young boys developing into, young men, most of whom are conservative. Yeah, you want to disrupt that if you're the left on this cultural revolution. And, there's a lot of examples, but so that's going on. And yeah, I think they're
Boy
getting.
Scouts took a big hit on that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And so the cultural revolution is accelerating. They're getting much better at it. And then on a more tactical level, these groups, they've progressed more in the past 4 months than they have in the past 4 years. Like, I think the country has probably aged a decade in the past 4 months.
Yes.
And what we're seeing now is a lot of these leftist groups, both armed and unarmed, they're developing what we would call combat support and combat service support classes. They're developing intelligence. They're developing, their signal corps, their communications. They have logistics and transportation. They have medical teams.
Even on the battlefield, they have these teams of, hey, get that chair, get that table, put it up there. Like, I mean, you saw that one video, that guy's like coordinating, like, effort, So they're getting,
they're doing real-time mapping. I kind of went over briefly how we battle track riots. They're doing the same thing. Like, they're keeping tabs. They have fixed and mobile surveillance teams out there. Look, here comes this police skirmish line. Okay, boom, put it on the map. They're doing real-time collaborative mapping.
And that's the thing that the news doesn't show. All they're showing is these like unhealthy people who don't get enough sleep, that don't work out, that don't take care of themselves, weirdos out there on the front lines. That's all you see, these people screaming. Like, the louder you scream, you're winning the argument. Or let's throw piss and shit at the cops. That's the only thing you're seeing. We're not seeing, like, that's what I'm saying. Like, this is perfect. Like, I need that behind the scenes intel. I don't care about the guys throwing the poop bags. That's going to be there. That's just there to stir up some stuff. That's the smoke and mirrors of the movement. Like, I want the information that you're talking about. Like, give me the people who are making these moves, the financiers of these. Like, who's financing this stuff? That's the main people that I want to know who's doing it. So, do you guys ever come across that? Like, how's that, or how hard is it to get that information?
Yeah, it's really beyond our scope. I mean, we don't do threat finance just because. I mean, a lot of that stuff's law enforcement. One thing we can do, one thing anybody can do is, if your local leftist groups have a Bitcoin address, like, you can actually go in there and see how much money's in that wallet, how much money has been sent to that address, that specific wallet. Now, maybe they change their wallet every week, so you can only get one weekly snapshot at a time. But all that stuff is traceable. Like, anybody can do that.
Damn. So how often do you do your reports, and like, what is like so if I sign up for Forward Observer, what do I expect to like get? Like, what is like the kind of breakdown of what the information is? Yeah,
well, we publish a daily report Monday through Friday, and we're about to introduce basically just like a Friday and some. So, I know a lot of people don't want to read a daily report. I get it. So, if you just want to take 5 minutes on a Friday and check out the InSum, basically we're just going to be putting the most important stuff on there. So yeah, daily, and then pretty soon weekly.
Where can we find this? What's the website?
The website is forwardobserver.com.
Nice. And do you have any plans in the future to kind of do any, audio, visual, like kind of like a TV show, not a TV show, but kind of like a, hey, here's the news, and kind of do like graphics and stuff like that at all?
Yeah. Or? Yeah, we do a daily podcast, a podcast version of the report. Okay. But nothing like this. Right. It's something I've thought about.
Where can people find that? Is that on iTunes?
Yeah. So if you subscribe to Forward Observer, you can go into your account and get the links to listen to the podcast.
Okay, good. All right. And then I got like one final question I kind of ask everybody is, knowing what you know now, from your life experiences, what would you tell a younger you to, what piece of advice would you give your younger you about everything that you have done in your life so far?
That's a good question. Given what I know now, and given what I think I know about the future, I would go back and say, there's this thing. It's called Bitcoin. And there's a dude named Eric Prince. You're going to learn about him later. Yeah. You need to be the Eric Prince of intelligence with your Bitcoin billion fortune.
Oh yeah. Big time.
That's exactly what I would do.
That's awesome. So you'd still do the intel thing.
I was like born for intelligence.
That's awesome.
I think. Yeah.
All right, Mike. Well, thank you for coming on today, and thank you for your time and everything like that. So hopefully people can sign up for some Forward Observer and get that intelligence they need and grow from there. So thank you.
Well, I appreciate having me on. It's been great to hang out with you.
All right.